Ollie, thank you for joining me today. You're Research Director at Ryder Architecture, Building Magazine's Architectural Practice of the Year, we should add. Can you please tell me a little bit about your role?
Yeah, so I've been at Ryder Architecture now for 3 years. Actually used to work there in the early days in sort of 2005 and recently rejoined the business to help run the research there. I work across all of our offices in the UK, so we're based in Newcastle, London, Glasgow, Liverpool, Manchester, as well as Amsterdam, Vancouver and Hong Kong. And it's about looking across the practice for where there's some really exciting, innovative bits of work happening, and then thinking how can we share that not just with the wider industry, but also across the different offices and locations to really get to grips with lessons learned, what are we doing well, what could we do better. And it's that kind of mentality that brought me back to Ryder Architecture, which was about always continuously learning, continuously evolving the way that we do things, and looking to be innovative and pioneering as much as possible. I think it's an overused word, pioneering, but you know, it's part of the journey that we're on with regards to research and development in the business.
We're here today at Future Build, and you're chair of the judges for Future Build's Big Innovation Pitch. So this is sort of a Dragon's Den style with 6 innovations that are being pitched to a panel of judges. Do you think there's enough innovation within our sector, and how do we encourage more innovation?
I think there's an increasing amount of innovation within the sector. I think we're in a situation now where there's almost a scale of innovation that happens. So at one end you've got the things that the people are really comfortable with and that the industry is really comfortable with, you know, the things that look and feel familiar but are slightly newer because they're lower carbon, they're more sustainable, they support the circular economy. And then at the other end of the scale you've got some really exciting new developments around biotech, biomaterials, and that space is really starting to grow as well, which is quite an interesting space. So there's this spectrum that exists within the industry.
It's often said the construction industry is slow to change. How do we start accelerating change, and how do we go about changing sort of the behaviour of our industry?
We are typically quite slow to change as an industry, and slow to adopt actually. But what's really interesting in this current sort of wave of innovation, you know, we're facing the climate emergency. There's a huge pressure around social value and how we integrate social value into our designs and create more resilient communities. And we've obviously got other pressures around how digital's evolving in this space. So we're at this nexus of all of these different disruptors, and the built environment and place is at the center of all of that. And I think people are starting to realize, hang on, I've got my part to play in this as well. And that's where we're definitely engaging with people who aren't typically from the built environment. We're engaging with people who are maybe from a chemistry background or a science background in terms of biology or marine biology, in all of these different spaces, who are really knocking on the door to say, we think we've got a really good solution, just work with us to help us get it to market, to help us get it in a pilot project and demonstrate that we've got something really exciting here.
You mentioned about the fact that a lot of innovation is around the materials that we're comfortable and that we're safe with. And I get the feeling a lot of that innovation is maybe linked to regulations, and actually it's about improving thermal performance, etc. But then you've also mentioned there, you know, biology and chemistry. Do we need to start thinking wider about how these sciences and material sciences, you know, are linked together, and it isn't just about that sort of that sort of entry-level innovation, if we can call it that?
I often say there was a line in the original RIBA charter which was about reconnecting and working with the wider arts and sciences, and I think for a lot of years architecture lost that. You know, we'd be probably, arguably, some might disagree, but I think we became quite self-referential, you know, for almost a century plus. Now we're getting to the stage where we are really massively reconnecting with those wider arts and sciences. You know, we're working with those really innovative new startups that, like you say, are just looking at the way we do things and saying there's got to be a better way to do it than this, and trying to affect some greater change within the industry. And the big innovation pitch that you mentioned as well that's happening later today is just a snapshot of some of the amazing activity and the fantastic businesses that are emerging.
Going back to the innovation that we're comfortable with versus sort of the biotech and sort of the sciences at the opposite end, and then we've probably got off-site sort of somewhere in that middle. Kind of almost feels that you could lay that over the industry in terms of we have volume housing that is safe and traditional, and we've always done it this way at one end with the safe innovations, then we go to the landmark kind of one-off buildings that are really sort of pioneering and breaking ground at the other end. Is that acceptable? Do we acknowledge that's okay? Or, how do we try and take these one-off buildings into more of a mass market?
So there's always going to be the need for the pilots and the demonstrators and the projects where you can maybe afford that level of innovation to begin with. It is frustrating that we can't integrate this into the volume offer at an early stage. But with the guys that we've brought come to Future Build with, in terms of a company that makes net zero blocks, unbelievable work that they're doing, and another company that makes fire safe insulation, we're totally confident that we could probably build a net zero home tomorrow. It's well within reach. It's just not happening at scale. But what the UK is very good at is supporting innovation. There's a lot of grants out there. There's a really strong research and innovation culture that's been bubbling away for many years, but now it's really starting to get really exciting. We're starting to see a lot more construction and architectural companies engage with that level of innovation.
You mentioned about sort of innovations to build net zero homes. We've got an existing building stock.
Yep.
A massive existing building stock. There seems to be a lot of focus on new build and not enough on retrofit.
Yep.
Is there an even balance between innovation for new versus innovation for retrofit?
I mean, there's a well-touted figure that we've got about 92% of the building stock that we actually need. Categorically, that Victorian building stock that often exists in most cities it's extremely good quality. It just needs a bit of TLC. And there's nothing more damaging to wider communities and creating a more resilient community, particularly in deprived areas, as large-scale land clearances that often don't get redeveloped within a reasonable time frame. So there's people living in deprived areas where there's whole streets that have been knocked down, when in reality the approach we should be taking is one that's all about retrofit. We should be looking to retrofit all of this fantastic old building stock. And doing something with it. And we've got some great projects on the go with the YMCA and advanced materials companies. Some of them are here today, around how do we retrofit our existing building stock, our existing homes, using advanced materials. And that work's really exciting, and we're trying to do it for people who are really in need of housing.
As we're at Future Build, it makes sense that we look to the future. So is there sort of one innovation or one area of the sciences that excites you most in terms of what it could potentially offer to the future?
There's probably two. So the first one's around anything that supports the circular economy. So anything that does anything fantastic with the waste that we're creating and or reuses elements of waste in new materials, in advanced materials. So I think that really sets me on fire, that we can not waste and we can reuse other people's waste in a new product. The other area, which I spend probably a lot of time looking at, is around biotech, and that's something I'm incredibly passionate about. We've got some amazing companies in the UK that are looking at mycelium production. Can we grow building components? Growing a panel or a brick or a block that actually sequesters twice its own weight in carbon, as opposed to costing 3 times its own weight in carbon to make. And that's absolutely the future. But we have to adopt it more quickly. We have to get people more comfortable with it. And the big issue there is around skills and training and starting to get more familiar with that technology. The other areas around is still in that biotech space, but it's actually, we're bringing it in from Sydney, Australia, and it's all around microalgae, and every second breath we take is attributable to algae, not forests as often thought. And looking at how can we build sort of building bioreactors, how can we clean the air and create a high-value biomass using microalgae, and the research that's been going on by the marine biologists in Sydney, Australia, and that's really exciting stuff.
You mentioned skills as part of that. So the industry has a habit of talking about a skills shortage, skills crisis. Have we actually got a skills opportunity? Because we've just been talking about a lot of innovations and technologies from algae and sort of biotechs and the sciences that a lot of people wouldn't naturally associate with the construction industry. Are we at a place where, you know, we've got a great opportunity to appeal to a much wider audience?
I think we are, and you know, the construction sector is often touted as that sort of keystone sector that keeps the economy going. And I think it's due a bit of a refresh in the way that we look at it and the way that we think about it, because you know there's a number of challenges that we face. You know, we know that we've got the climate emergency. I've mentioned the other disruptors that we've got going on, but we've also got some fantastic brains, some real innovators and intelligent people. And then we've got this levelling up discussion that's going on at the same time. So there's an opportunity here. There's clearly an opportunity to embrace modern methods of construction, to embrace new advanced materials, to look at the way that the materials that we're using and look at the deep science that's going on there, and start clusters of these pockets of these activities up and down the country in areas where, you know, where the knowledge is that support a circular economy. Another thing that we can throw into that mix as well. So there's absolutely an opportunity more so than that lack. That being said, there's a huge lack of skills and training around retrofit at the minute, and we, you know, as a country, we absolutely need to push as hard as we can on that retrofit argument to get that skills and training through.
You mentioned knowledge. Is there enough knowledge share going on? Are we still kind of running the risk of working in little silos, and do we need to, you know, if we're going to accelerate change, do we have to be a bit braver, a bit more trusting, and actually look at genuine collaboration rather than...
Yeah, I think, you know, we're as well as sometimes being slow, it's quite easy to level the siloed argument at the construction sector. I think what's really encouraging over the last sort of 3 to 5 years is you've noticed people becoming far less competitive and far more collaborative, and I think collaboration's absolutely the key to being able to share knowledge, to share ideas, to work together with a competitor and pool your resources to conduct that research project, or to start that demonstrator or that pilot scheme. And that's something that we've been doing with the Future X podcast that we launched with Future Build, and getting all of those innovators and disruptors into one space, and making it just an open platform to share the latest views and some of the craziest ideas and the things that are going on.
So we're here today, as I said, at Future Build, and we're sharing knowledge. One final question: if there was one thing that you hoped sort of visitors to the show walked away with, what would that be? I
think it's to be really hopeful about what's coming and to have their eyes opened. I often say that the construction sector is categorically the most exciting sector to work in, without a shadow of a doubt. You know, we're at the time where we're facing all those challenges, but we've got some insane digital technology coming into play. You know, we're using laser scanning, we've got VR, we've got all those elements of digital technology. But then we've got all of these relationships with scientists and psychologists and people who are really focused on social value, and just at its heart, making better places and improving people's lives. And that's the bit that's exciting. And if people come today and they see the things that are going on here, everybody's pushing in the same direction. And the people that aren't pushing in the same direction are probably not going to be here in 5 years. So what's really exciting is that energy and that drive to just create a better future and improve people's lives along the way.
Ollie, thank you very much for talking to me today.
Cheers, David.
We hope you found this video from Fabric useful. For more, don't forget to subscribe, browse our playlists, and please like or share this video. Thanks for watching.